The first of which is NorthWest Copper, which people may remember is the resulting entity from the Sun Metals and Serengeti merger that took place, I believe, in February. So Peter Bell, CEO, just recently appointed, I think, in March. And as many of you may know, we like to work with Mark O'Day, and he's exec chair of NorthWest Copper. So here to give us a bit of an update, because our audience is somewhat familiar with the story, but love to hear what's going on. Hi, Peter.
Hi. Thanks for the intro, and thanks everyone for your time. So I will give a little background on myself and then quickly mention why I wanted to join this group, and then go through what we have and what it is that we're going to try and do. So I am a geologist. I spent about 16 years as a geologist in the industry, about 13 years with Newmont Mining, a bunch of time in Nevada, about 4 years in Peru. I was the chief mine geologist at Yanacocha in Peru when that was one of Newmont's big operations. A couple of years of looking at things for Newmont to buy, so working in corporate development with them out of the Denver office, and then 10 years on the buy side, eventually co-managing a mining-focused long-short hedge fund based in London, and spun off a little private equity business that also was mining-focused. And then wanted to return to Canada. So I moved back to Toronto in 2018 from the UK, and spent 3 years working in mining investment banking for National Bank Financial here in Toronto, and working on advising companies on M&A and strategic activities, and essentially raising capital. So I've known Mark for quite a while. I first met him in 2008. And Mark and I started talking about this in January. And when I think about why I left banking to come back industry and get involved with a pre-production base metal story, I was attracted to the base metal space. A lot's going on there right now. There's generally a shortage of those kinds of opportunities, pre-production opportunities versus the gold space, for lots of reasons. One of which is a lot of times the projects end up being quite large for junior companies to develop. Our project, we believe, is one that we can actually develop ourselves. So that was a key attraction. I wanted a group that was well-funded. And in case I forget to mention it, we are well-funded. We have about 18.5 million in our treasury, and are backed, by Mark O'Day and his kind of experience in raising capital and moving projects forward. Copper or gold worked for me. Lots of experience in both from a investor and technical point of view, and kind of multiple ways to kind of unlock value in the company. So grow at a big resource and potentially sell it to somebody, grow at this resource and put it into production ourselves. We have multiple ways to move the company forward. And I want to be in a good jurisdiction. So we're in BC, the central part of BC, in an area where we've got existing agreements with First Nations and other communities nearby. So a great place to operate, and lots of upside. We've got a good exploration pipeline as well. So I'll just go through this on our deck, and I'll start with this slide right here. So Deborah mentioned that the company was formed from the merger of two predecessor companies. Those predecessor companies were Sun Metals and Serengeti Resources. And Sun Metals' main project was the Stardust project. It basically sits underneath this camp here. This is the old Sun Metals camp. And immediately underneath it is the Stardust deposit. The Stardust deposit is a carbonate replacement deposit, so high grade copper, massive sulfide, sort of like a VMS, but not exactly, but similar from a mining point of view. And we put out our first resource on that deposit about a month ago, about a little under 8 million tons in total of about 2% copper equivalent, so quite high grade. Immediately adjacent to Sun Metals project, or what was the Sun Metals project, is Serengeti Resources flagship, which is a project called Quinica, which is a BC porphyry, copper gold, decent scale. But what's really interesting about it is it has a very high grade core to it that is actually eroded and tilted in a way that it's actually close to surface. So accessible early in the mine life, in a potential mine life of the two put together. So when we put these two projects together, the Stardust deposit and the Quinica deposit, we end up with quite a unique pre-production scenario, which is very high grade from one deposit, quite high grade from the other. We've got a mix of scale and grade and margin, and we believe we can put out a project and build a project that is manageable for us from a capital point of view, so something we can afford to finance and build ourselves. Smallish footprint, which is helpful from a permit point of view, but with material production that would be in line with some of the other BC copper producers that are currently active. So a couple other things about the slide, other than to point out the proximity of the two projects and to just say that they're really one now from a project planning point of view. We have good infrastructure here. This project you can drive to. I was there a few weeks ago. It's got year-round access. It's not in the really rugged part of British Columbia. You can see it's mountainous, but it's not forbidding. And there's good other infrastructure. There's power within about 70K and even rail within a couple of 100K. So pretty good setup, pretty low risk kind of project, lots of kind of things already de-risked on the infrastructure and geology side. And our plan is to do some additional drilling here, put the two projects together, put out a preliminary economic assessment by the early part of next year and describe what we think is a really unique and important and new copper, potential new copper mine here in British Columbia. I don't want to dwell on this slide because it just reviews everything that the company is kind of about, other than to point out that in addition to advancing the combined projects, we also have an exploration portfolio. And the flagship of that exploration portfolio is a project called East Niv. East Niv was worked up by the Serengeti team right from scratch, a grassroots kind of prospect. And we have an opportunity to discover a brand new copper gold porphyry there, and I'll review that in a few slides. Just a bit on the management team I described myself. We just added Vesta Filipchuk, who's had a long career with Teck and is very well known and well connected with all the First Nations in the region, and is really going to be helpful for us in maintaining what are already pretty good relations there. Jim Lang, a great addition, also PhD geoscientist who's worked in BC for 30 years. Lauren McDougall was the CFO of Sun Metals. She's continued with us. And Ian Neal was involved in targeting some of the high-grade holes, really the main one at Stardust, and really helped make Stardust what it is now. So great team on board. The board is a mix of really Sun Metals and Serengeti previous board members. Mark O'Day, obviously the chair, and Dave Moore is the ex-CEO of Serengeti. A little plug for Oxygen. So we're trying to tell the market that we can build a mine. It's helpful to work in a group that has actually done it before. So just from a stats point of view, since 2016, 3 of the world's new gold mines have come from the Oxygen group. So Long Canyon came from Frontier, sold to Newmont. Karma was put together and then built by True Gold and then sold to Endeavour in Burkina Faso, and Pure Gold built up by Pure Gold in production now. So financed and built the last 2. So some experience in actually putting mines together. This is where we are in BC. Lots of transactions in BC recently. We sit right between Mount Milligan and Kemess in an area, as I said, with pretty good infrastructure and an easy place to work. I mentioned the First Nations. It's a huge priority for us to build partnerships with First Nations in the region. We've added resources, but we start from a very good point of view from having existing exploration agreements and good relations. Something on the infrastructure. This is Mount Milligan here again in Kemess. So this is the road into Quinica Stardust, the road into Lorraine. You can actually drive between these 2 projects as well through logging roads, not public roads. East Niv is our grassroots potential discovery. It's actually helicopter access, but there's infrastructure nearby, road nearby. So in terms of what we're going to do this year, at a high level, 7,200 meters of drilling in our initial plan at Quinica Stardust. All of that is actually at Quinica. East Niv will start drilling in July and drill until about October, just weather-based being helicopter access, so about 2,700 meters in the first round. And then Lorraine is really trying to get the most information, squeeze the most information out of a project that's had a bunch of money put into it already, but we're looking at it with a kind of different lens. So the recipe here at Quinica Stardust, that's, as I said, one project really. They're about 7 kilometers apart. The geology is a little different in terms of how they formed, but the mineralogy is the same, and the metallurgy is almost identical in the test work that we've done. So our belief is we can put the 2 projects together, run them through one mill. That mill would be down here closer to Quinica. We're focused on the high grade. Basically, all of Stardust is high grade, so we'll have all of that. And the highest grade part of Quinica, scalable CapEx, so CapEx that is something we can afford. And then really with having a more compact footprint, we're trying to have a project that is more straightforward from a permitting point of view as well. Just some points on this. These are really slides that went with our resource that we put out not too long ago on Stardust. I'm just showing the thickest part of the deposit. Down here, the 421 zone, there's still targets open at depth and some parallel steep dipping zones of copper gold mineralization that we can test in the future. And then just some of the historic drilling here. This was a spectacular drill hole drilled in 2018, 100 meters of 5.3% copper equivalent. There's certainly potential to drill more holes like that. Sun Metals drilled lots of pretty spectacular stuff. So this is a pretty unique deposit in the world and in the world of copper deposits in BC. So this is what we got out of our resource estimate, a big increase in size over the previous one. So we have about 2 million tons of 2.6% copper equivalent and indicated, and a little under 6 at just a bit under 2% in inferred. So one of the highest grade copper deposits in BC. I'm just looking at BC deposits. So BC deposits are, on the lower side globally in terms of grade, generally benefit from great infrastructure and good cheap power. Our deposit is quite different. This Stardust is a different kind of animal. It's really helpful in terms of that combined project, and you can think of it as a sweetener that really makes Quinica something really special. The power of the drill bit, so the drilling that's been done here, that expansion of the resource is really through the work that Sun Metals did drilling between 2018 and 2020. So they doubled the size of the indicated, and they increased the size of the inferred by 200%. So a huge increase in resource, and that's not about fiddling with cutoffs and so on. It's really about adding value through the drill bit, and we believe there's still some potential there at Stardust. And just in terms of scale, so we're talking about adding Stardust to Quinica. Quinica brings the scale. Although we're not going to do the whole thing, we're focused on the high grade. It's a big, decent sized BC porphyry deposit in its own right, with M&I of about 224 million tons. One of the unique things about Quinica is the geometry of the high grade. So you can see this is a cross section through the copper block model. Each one of these blocks represents different copper grades, and the higher grades are in magenta here, plus 0.5% copper. You can see there's a very distinct high grade part of the deposit here, which coincides with a monzonite unit within the porphyry sequence. And that instead of being subvertical like it probably was when it was in place, it's been tilted geologically and eroded such that the high grade actually occurs close to the surface and continues close to the surface. So we're on the upper surface of the deposit with the best stuff, which means we can mine it earlier, and mining it earlier means we have a more robust cash flow profile and quicker payback and a bunch of other metrics that are helpful financially. This deposit, it's unlike a lot of copper deposits in that you don't have to wait years and years to get to the best stuff. So Quinica is unique in its own right and very complementary to Stardust. And then just a little bit on the metallurgy. So very high recoveries, which really reflect the grade and the coarse mineralogy. The flow sheet is very similar to Quinica's, and we produce good economic concentrate grades and very clean cons in both deposits. Jumping completely, changing gears here to East Niv. So here we have the potential for a new discovery. and when you're looking at exploration at this stage, you're really looking for indications of grade, that there's actually metal there, and then you want to know what's the scale. So here we have indications of grade. We've got outcropping mineralization. These are outcrops that were sampled by the Serengeti team, by Dave Moore and his team. And for example, 0.35 copper, 0.3 grams per ton gold. These are kind of ore grade type, economic type samples at surface. Over 20, this is an average of 19 samples here. Similar number here for showing number 2 and number 3. So we know we have mineralization here that would make it in terms of being in a real deposit. Now we need to know how big it is, and the way we figure out the size of the system and further target it is through geophysics. We've shown, just for scale here, we've included red crest of Newcrest and Imperial Metals on the left, and our deposit on the right. Now this is the outline of the geophysics here. It's not the outline of the deposit, but it basically shows you the size of the alteration system, the hydrothermal system that would be associated with this mineralization. And when we look at that, we can see that this is the right size for a big porphyry copper deposit. So we'll be drilling in this. We'll be drill about 11 holes initially. As I said, we'll start in July, drill until the end of October, when we may not be able to get in there after that from a helicopter point of view, but we may have a brand new discovery of a previously unknown porphyry copper gold deposit in British Columbia. So pretty exciting stuff. Then going over to Lorraine, so this is the third leg of our pipeline, or of our group of projects. This one's quite different. This project's been worked for a long time by Teck. There are tens of millions of tons of non-compliant resource there. So material where we already know the grade and we know the tonnage. Teck hadn't done the work in the past to put it into 43-101 compliant shape because it wasn't really material to them, but we can do that work pretty easily and continue to explore it. What we're really trying to do is figure out if there's a subset of mineralization here that can be included in a mine plan, a potential mine plan with Quinica Stardust once we build that, once we put that mill in place, so we can look at it in a different way and get value where the previous operators may not have. So some of the results, we do have really good grades there, and we've got a decent amount of tonnage so far, and we're definitely going to feel like we can find more. In terms of catalysts, so we've basically done all the things that we said we would here. We closed the merger. Merger was closed March 5th of this year. We did the metallurgy in April. We put out for Stardust. We did the resource in May. We started drilling last weekend at Quinica. So the initial program is about 18 holes. We'll have our first drill test at East Nib in July. We'll do the Lorraine program. We'll start actually next week. And hopefully, we will be adding some 43-101 compliant resources there. In Q4, the drilling that we've just started will be finished, and we'll have an updated resource at Quinica. And the updated resource at Quinica with the new resource at Stardust will go into this new PEA, which we think will be a very robust project and a brand new potential copper mine right in our backyard. So that's it from a deck point of view. And as I said, we've got about $18.5 million in cash, so very well financed.
Great. I think that was really thorough, and I like that you left off with what we can expect over the course of the year. How many 1,000 meters are you planning with all the programs? It's quite flexible. So our initial program that we've got is a bit over 10, so almost 11,000. But we have the capacity at Quinica. We've got lots of targets there, and we've got lots of money. And we can work year round. So we could keep drilling right to the end of the year, and that's probably what we're going to do. But in our first phase of what we've put in, it's about 11,000. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Peter. Nice to see you.
Thank you, you too.